For everything from questions about cucumbers to homes on cul-de-sacs, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show with Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and James DeFreitas, the son. For the next hour, call in with your questions about gardening, growing your favorite veggies, and growing your profits in real estate. Call them anytime at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I am Stan DeFreitas, Mr. Greenthumb. It's kind of the handle that I've had for the last 45 years. And you are?
And, of course, I am James DeFreitas, and we are here every week for you. Of course, the show is on Sunday mornings from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's also repeated on Saturday nights at 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. if there isn't a Gator game, and I don't think that applies right at the moment.
Well, they're doing a little bit of basketball.
They're doing a little basketball, so that could
I don't know why they think the Gators are more important than us. But
well, it's hard to compete against sports, but you know there is gardening and the two interesting cats that talk a little bit about real estate from time to time. And one of the things I like to always point out is every show is that if you have a gardening question, you can always point your browser to askmrgreenthumb.com. That's ASKMR Greenthumb.com. And if you have that specific question, you can go to the website. You can click on the Ask button. It's in the upper left corner, and you literally can submit your gardening question or insect question right there from your phone. So if you've taken a quick, little glance at something and you're not sure what it is, we truly believe that knowledge is power. So point that browser to askmrgreenthumb.com. And of course, today we have a guest in with us today, and his name is Jason Sheridan. And again, I don't want to butcher the name of the company because it sounds Italian to me. Pignoni. Okay, and so one of the things I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to give a little background of who you are. And again, you have a degree, a Bachelor's of Science from Drexel University in Civil Engineering. And you've been a civil engineer, it looks like, for a lot of different companies, and a staff engineer, it looks like, the longest from Pignoni.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about what that entails and what your responsibilities are and how you do that.
For the civil engineering, it's basically creating land that's usable for developers.
Got it.
A lot of people think that is just permitting, but it has to be constructible as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a pretty large aspect outside of once we get the land development permits, it still has to be a constructible project as far as utilities, grading, parking lots, etc. The building pad,
sure,
all that has to work and be stable.
Sure, and the thing that one of the things that comes to mind too in Pinellas County is some of the land we have some very low areas.
Yes.
So I'm imagining you're always looking at the elevations. You're trying to make a determination as to if a piece of land is even buildable that isn't going to have a problem, or what it needs to have done to it to make it, retrofit for the use that you're being hired for.
Correct. A lot of the projects start out with either feasibility studies or due diligence,
mm-hmm.
where if they don't have a topographic and boundary survey, we are able to perform that, as well as the geotechnical services, phase 1,
mm-hmm.
ESA, which is basically an environmental assessment of the site, and environmental. So people refer to that as bugs and bunnies.
Bugs and bunnies.
So that's basically wetlands, delineating wetlands, endangered species, and that's all compiled into a report up front given to the client so they can make a decision as to whether or not they want to move ahead with the acquisition of the property.
Got it.
And a lot of times the banks, the lenders,
are going to want
prefer to see that as well.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Well, yeah, because at that point you're an educated buyer,
Mm-hmm.
and you're making an informed decision based on the facts, not what you hope that they will be, but what they are and what it's going to take to make that parcel of land, constructible, as you put it. Yep. And so one of the things that I did want to mention, and one of the reasons that we were so fortunate to bump into Jason, is that your company was hired by I assume the Maddie Williams Foundation, or you were hired from the City of Safety Harbor, one of the two.
It was the Maddie Williams Foundation.
Okay, so Maddie Williams Foundation, which is located right there in Safety Harbor, and for the folks that are not familiar with that, they do a wonderful job in taking care of people. They're always doing their level best. They've got playgrounds and after-school programs, and they've got all kinds of stuff going on there. And so I can't think of a better local organization, especially, if you want to give a donation or something to that effect. It's a great opportunity to do that. I know, Stan, you've proceeded, because one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that you also have an auctioneer's license. And so you participated as an auctioneer for them one year.
Yeah, we raised like $13,000 for the Maddie Williams thing. And I was sitting there, we did, hey, remember, it's a bicycle, and it's, we got $200, $225, $225, $230, $240. We kept moving the price up, and we were helping to raise money. They also have a food pantry there for people who need the help. They've got a playground area for children who need after school programs and things of that nature. They are big on Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners and that type of thing. So they really are. I know I've worked with Patty and Chris Kent and some others who have been instrumental over the years and years trying to help that. And it's nice to have. And when you go to Safety Harbor and you think, well, it's such a, you think of the piers and you think of the spa and you think of those things and all the quaint shops. But it's also nice to know that in every community there are people out there who need help. And it's so nice to know that there is a place like that. So we were glad, Jason called me, the former director had recommended me, and James and I'm an arborist, certified arborist, and I've done things like this in the past. I've injected trees. James has helped me with a ton of projects, and thank God I've got him to be my legs and half my brain these days. and so that's just wonderful. We were glad there, and we were talked to you, and I thought you sounded, as you are, a very young, intelligent man, well, compared to me, young. And I said, you'd be a great guest, because I don't think most people know how things come about. How does something come from nothing to something? And you're part of that process.
Yep, on the landward side we are. Definitely.
Sure. And one of the things that I think is kind of interesting, and it's something that was not always the case, is, one of the things you asked us to provide was a tree risk assessment. And, and again, I'm not saying that this hasn't been done in the past, but I think this is becoming more of the standard, that more municipalities are requiring this. So from my point of view, it's pretty interesting in that they're calling it the track system, of course that's now become a separate certification that you were telling me about.
Yeah, we use the track system. I haven't become track certified yet. It's just a matter of time and grade to do it, I'm sure. But there's so many things I do. We're both real estate agents. We've got to keep that up. I've got to keep my pest control license up and keeping my arborist thing up.
And your auctioneer's license.
So it's like every week it seems like I'm either taking another test or filling something out or watching videos, as I did yesterday for MLS.
Sure.
To keep up so we can enter stuff. People said, well, how come I can't sell it myself? Well, certainly you can sell it yourself, but how do you get it on MLS? But you can get out there with a megaphone or a sign, and that might work too.
Right.
So I think I saw a commercial for that.
Yeah, I like it. I think you did too. That's what I was thinking of too. Where the guy's yelling in the microphone, "Our house is for sale!" And yes, and that's the reason. Often it is good to go to realtors because and real estate agents. We are both realtors, and but a real estate agent, just if you belong to the association, you get to call yourself a realtor.
Mm-hmm. Well, overall, that sounds like a pretty lengthy list of credentials.
We've done a bunch.
Arborist, real estate agent, auctioneer, radio show host.
And what's interesting, too, is with the auctioneering, is that we applied a lot of that for years. We applied that to selling homes. So it wasn't that we were really selling stuff. There are stuff auctioneers, and, of course, you see that they'll have, a big warehouse, and they will sell into bicycles and that kind of thing, and you need to be a licensed auctioneer to sell stuff. So that's something that is important. The other attribute is that anytime we got into a property where somebody was either getting a divorce, or there was somebody that was going to be going into pre-foreclosure, or they were relocating for their job, they didn't have the time that it took to wait the 180 days in a contract to potentially hit their number. So a lot of times what they would do is there another way? And so one of the things we came up with is, well, yeah, there is another way. We could auction off the property at a known date and time and place for a reserve price, so that way they were assured to make sure they got at least the minimum that they were looking for. But yeah, we wanted to give people a third option, if you will, on getting it done. And potentially, if you get into a bidding war, then sometimes it gets kind of silly, in terms of what people are paying for the property. Now we're going through what I would consider more of a downward cycle in terms of we're starting to see the market, the effects of all of the rate increases taking place. So it doesn't matter even if you're not in the real estate business. You're starting to see price improvements. You're seeing open house signs go up on the weekends. You're starting to see the effects of people, of what I call agents for the first time, if they're new to the business, actually having to work the business in order to make the sale. And so it's a different environment out there. Yeah. And of course, if you're just talking to us, we're talking to Jason Sheridan, and he's a civil engineer. And one of the things that I think is interesting is we're talking a little bit about tree risk assessments. And, this is something that is becoming more of the standard, with regards to the permitting process. I assume it's in the permitting phase, or
it is usually with the site plan reviews.
Site plan reviews. Thank you, because I had a feeling I was gonna say that correctly. But one of the things I would suggest to a lot of, if you own a business and you have a bunch of oak trees, I think it would make a lot of sense, even if you're not making an expansion like Maddie Williams was doing and requiring additional construction. I think it would make sense to have a tree risk assessment done on all businesses, because believe it or not, this living thing that is on your property, you can and will become responsible for it if you didn't maintain it correctly. So, if a tree goes down and it hits something, it hits a car or hits a building or something like that, your insurance is probably going to take care of it, or at least you hope it does. But, but the problem that you might have is, what if you were told in advance that there was a problem with your tree and took no action? Where does the insurance become the responsible party, and your lack of taking action become, the deciding factor?
I know I've worked on a couple cases, one where a branch fell. They knew the branch was dead, and they didn't bother to take care of it. Mm-hmm. It fell and hit somebody, hurt them.
Was that in a park? I think a city park?
No, it was actually a restaurant had a park-like setting, and they were doing barbecuing and stuff, and they would invite people, bring, like, say, 100 people in for a special event. And they loved it because it was park-like, you could walk around, but they hadn't really maintained their trees.
Sure.
So it became a problem.
Absolutely. And with that noise, we're going to take a quick break here, but don't change that dial, and we will be back after the break.
Stay with us as the plant and real estate talk continues right here on AM 860, The Answer.
Want to talk real estate? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, aflre.com.
Why choose Stafford Tree Service? Is it because they're experienced, have the latest equipment, and friendly professional personnel? Absolutely. Stafford's positioned themselves as a leading tree trimming company in all of Tampa Bay. With honest professionals and competitive pricing, they'll earn your trust too. In business for over 15 years, Stafford Tree Service is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide you the very best tree trimming experience. Call today, 727-546-8786, 727-546-8786. On the web at staffordtreesvc.com.
Biophilia, our innate attraction to other living things. It's why people love plants. And around Tampa Bay, Plants, that's Plantz, is bringing nature inside, in workspaces and homes by delivering beautiful foliage plants. Our plants increase oxygen and filter out pollutants, reducing stress and improving productivity. And get you in touch with your biophilic side. Go to plantz.us.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I am Stan, the dad, of course, DeFreitas and James DeFreitas, and we have Jason Sheridan also with us today. So in case you're just tuning in, we're talking a little bit about the idea of how engineering works and how trees are important. And, in the old days, they used to come in and just everything was asphalt. You cut every darn tree down, and I think they made a rock song about that and turned it into a parking lot. It's an old song that if you have to be of a certain age to remember that. But it was true. I mean, you'd see things like on Belcher Road, where there was the Publix there, that one shopping center. They tore everything down and stuck in a few cabbage palms and called it good. Now, they kind of went back in a few years ago, redeveloped it, looked like they re-engineered it, and made that kind of what I considered a horrible-looking parking lot look good. And you could see somebody had done some planning, and they brought in some nice-looking plant material. And there's no reason not to, but I can understand. Originally, they went, what's the cheapest? Well, we put asphalt there. We can get more parking in. Let's get more parking in, and let's get more parking in. And now there's more of a move toward keeping things and doing things of that nature. And I think you'd be part of that process.
Yeah. So almost every new project requires at least a tree survey of what's there. We work throughout the state. Some are more strict than others, and they'll require, like City Safety Harbor requires an arborist and a gradation to determine if the tree's healthy or if it's in decline.
Right, and we just go through a process of
for the
determining
risk assessment.
what class we put the tree into, and then what we think the risk assessment. And those trees, some of them have been there. We've treated some of them over the years. They've had their share of problems, because anytime you put a tree right next to asphalt and concrete, it's under a stress.
Well, sure. And specifically, I'm thinking of one of our clients that we do tree injections for. It's down there in St. Pete. He's kind of, I think he purchased, to me, it was kind of an older Mediterranean style, Spanish looking style architecture. And I can see that they put a road in where there was a nice, beautiful live oak. And you can see that after they put this road in and they put the asphalt right over the roots. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that trees can't make it, because clearly, just right outside our studios here, you can see there's a bunch of live oak trees out front that are making it. But the difference
just barely. They've got a lot of problems.
Well, they have problems, but they are doing better than the ones, say, in St. Pete that we're treating. And
yes.
The reason being is that they're having probably more, the roots have more exposure to the ground, and so the trees being able to do what the trees need to do. And the issue that is in this particular case, and the reason I brought it up, is because there was already a sidewalk flanking the right side of the tree, and then they put this huge asphalt to the left side of the tree. So now both sides of this tree are being flanked by, it's not allowing to respirate. It's not allowing it to do the things that trees need to do. And so it looks like it's going in decline. So we've been trying to keep it alive by giving it extra nutrients. And, and another thing that happens too in Florida too is that a lot of the trees will start to get little BB holes into them. And those are usually caused by a wood boring beetle. And, a lot of times what will happen is you'll get tree trimming companies. And again, not all tree trimming companies want to just come in and cut down trees. I think the really good ones come in and want to assess the tree and decide if they really need to come down. But the problem is that, they're not in a position where they can actually provide any treatment to do it, because you need to be a licensed pest control operator in order to apply the pesticide to the trees. And so we give them an incentive a different way of keeping the tree, which has its own intrinsic value, because you'd like to keep the tree. Provide shade. It's good for the environment. And, if you're a climate activist, I can't think of a better carbon sequestration machine than a tree. So I think that there's just benefits all the way around. And whether you're left or right of the politics makes no bearing on it to me. It's just, I think most people, even on the right, want more trees. I think they just realize it's good for the ecosystem.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things we do is we give people another option, and we go out there and we'll actually inject the trees. And we put the little port all the way around the trees. And, it's not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than taking the trees down. And you told me the other day what we thought was going to be $7,000 or $8,000 to remove this massive tree. What did they tell you?
There was $21,000 for one big tree. And so, the guy came to me and said, you guys are really cost effective for us to have you inject the trees and keep it, as opposed to removing it. And of course, we also had a client that had literally built his house to keep the trees. He loved the trees, And the builders really were kind of hacked. They go, it'd be so much easier if you let us just take these things out so we can do our building. And he said, well, I know you're going to gripe and not like it. He said, but I want to keep the trees. These were grand oaks, too, that had been here for 100 years.
They're pretty, especially around Hillsborough County, they're pretty protected.
Yeah, and we like that. I mean, we think that trees should be protected. And one of the things, the other avenue of one of the things that Stan and I do, and it's how we typically bump into other civil engineers like yourself, is we, through the process of eminent domain. So we typically will either go out and we will work with or against. A lot of times we're working for the homeowner when they're in a condemnation proceeding. And so we'll go out there and we will provide an assessment of the values for their trees, which is actually, it's a lot of work, but the tree assessment thing was, in my opinion, was also a lot of work too. Yeah. But we'll go out there and we'll spend time with the engineer and the land appraiser and the attorney and the clients themselves, and we'll go through their property and we'll make a pretty good determination of how much trees are going to be in the take, what'll be left in the remainder, what will be impacted behind what's left of the remainder. The other thing that I always like to point out to people too is that it isn't just when they put a road in. You've got in the one thing that I'm thinking of particularly, let's say they put in a road and then there's a power line easement that comes in right next to the road. Well, what happens to the trees that, the root structures when they're impacted by the additional, trampling that's going to be done to put this other utility in? You're in a situation where those trees are going to be impacted, and if the roots are, 80% destroyed, even though the tree is still erect and looks like it's okay, it may die later. And so one of the things we try to do is provide value even for those type of trees in a way that allows the homeowner to be fully compensated. And one of the things that we've been struggling with over the years is there's been a lot of bad case law out there where a lot of attorneys, especially arguing for the counties, have been saying, oh, well, trees are just contributory value. We could go and buy another 10-acre tract and it would have X amount of trees on it. And therefore, they don't have independent value. And we're kind of on the other side of things. Well, wait a second. That person there planted some of these trees. Or what if that tree was part of somebody's nursery? What if they sold those type of trees? Does that not change the way those trees are viewed? And to me, if you've ever owned a property in Florida and if it has trees around it, you want that because your house, your heat, your cooling costs are going to be less. Yeah, so to me, you can go out and have that picnic lunch if you want in August, which I don't recommend. You can have it under a beautiful oak tree, or you could have it in the full sun, and you can tell me how you're going to like your picnic lunch afterwards.
Sure.
So
you stay with us, of course. Don't change that dial. We're talking with Jason Sheridan. You've got James DeFreitas and myself, Stan DeFreitas. We're here, of course, and we appreciate you being with us if you're on YouTube or Facebook or listening to us. Stay with us as the Plant Talk continues here on N860 The Answer.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Broken air conditioner? Keep your home's AC running smoothly all year long with Easy Breezy AC. With thousands of active commercial and residential customers, Easy Breezy AC is Tampa Bay's most trusted HVAC company. Easy Breezy AC cares about those in need. Donate 2 cans of food and receive $20 off a $79 service call. Go to EasyBreezyAC.com and use promo code GreenThumb for an additional $10 off your service call. Call 727-856-HVAC. Life's hard. Comfort's not. Did you know that Stan DeFreitas Mr. Greenthumb can come to your house and examine your plants, trees, and palms? His knowledge can help you become the envy of your neighborhood with lush, green, healthy trees that don't just live, but thrive. Palms and oak trees are part of what makes Florida a beautiful place to live, but they get diseases and are often cut down. We offer ways to save your trees. Call or text Stan today at 727-423-4794 or go online to AskMrGreenthumb.com. That's AskMrGreenthumb.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I'm Stan DeFreitas, James DeFreitas, my great son, and Jason Sheridan, who is an engineer. Tell us a little bit about what made you decide to go into engineering?
Initially, it was architecture and engineering when I started in school.
Okay.
I definitely leaned more towards
Okay, a little
the
bit closer.
engineering in general.
Mm-hmm.
Going through school, that was more geared towards how everything worked instead of the aesthetics, more or less. And I was more interested in land, the civil engineering aspect of it, more so than mechanical or structural.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess as you're doing stuff, you have to kind of do it to decide what you kind of like, what you think you're going to enjoy. And so I'm sure you're busy every day looking at something or looking at drawings and renderings and things of that nature.
Yes, definitely.
So, and I would imagine today it's all done on computers. There's no drafting board. It's all done, I'm assuming, on AutoCAD or something like that.
Yes, yeah, a lot of there's still some drafters that it's still in CAD, but they're designated just as drafters for the markups. But
Sure.
AutoCAD's come along so much, especially the last 15 years, where it's more of a design tool now. It's not just 2D line work. It's basically you're creating the site in CAD that is going to be constructed.
Yeah, and see, and I must be old school too, because when the engineers send us over the drawings of where they're going to be in a take, and again, one of the things I was saying in the previous segment is that Stan and I, ultimately, if you're just joining us, we tend to get into doing a lot of eminent domain casework, providing expert witness testimony for trees, for plants and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we do is we go through, we count all of that, but often we'll go out, we'll meet with the engineer, the civil engineer, and then they'll explain to me things that I have no idea what they're saying, because they have, just like every industry, you guys have your own speak that makes perfect sense to you guys. So I would need some kind of Rosetta Stone for it to make sense to me. But one of the things that I found interesting is that one of the engineers that we work with is Lee Murray, and he's right there I think right off of US 19. And they're a partnership, and that's all they do is civil engineering, and they also get involved heavily into eminent domain proceedings. And so one of the things he was talking about was we were looking at a property, and I won't say where the property is because it's still under, being actively pursued. But the property in particular is, they're moving the road, and we're talking about how the drainage of where that water's going to go. And often what I found interesting is, and something I wouldn't have anticipated, but the civil engineer was very interested in hearing what the locals had to say about the water, where it typically goes, in addition to making their, they've got the elevation maps, they're interested in looking at the data that they've come up with and what they can know about the property, but they also were relying on local knowledge. And I wouldn't have necessarily automatically interpreted that would be taken into their overall assessment.
Yeah, that is one of the more helpful tools a lot of the times. I deal mainly with site. I have worked in roadway.
Mm-hmm.
We have another engineer who mainly does the roadway design. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times public input, if there's a few homeowners there that have been there since, they're second generation, they've been there for 50 years, not everything was recorded when it was constructed. So they might have a little bit more history than we can pick up on the plans.
Sure.
And that's always helpful.
Sure, yeah, and of course, one of the things that we found interesting is that they were talking about this once in 100 event that had occurred, and they talked about how, a hurricane had come in and flooded this area in the middle of our state, which I don't think any of us really thought that, in the middle of the state, that something like that would occur in that way. I mean, they were showing us water line marks on people's houses where it was darn near up near the roof.
Yeah, up near the eaves almost. It was, and looking at the soil, you would have thought it was dry looking, typical middle of the state pines, woodlands, and I thought, well, how could that possibly happen? He said it looked like a river coming through, and some of the people had to move out from their homes because the water, rose so quickly, and it kind of shocked me when they told me some of the stories about what had occurred. Now, I guess this was a freaky storm, but I think now that you know it, you have to almost then compensate for that if you were going to put in some new buildings.
Yeah, and each site especially in the middle of the state, is the requirements depend on whether or not it's a closed basin or an open basin that you're discharging to. So along the coast, like along the west coast here or on the east coast, they're all open basin. They discharge directly to either the Gulf or the Atlantic. Around the center of the state, and it is a little bit more depressed there, and there are a lot of lakes and some areas with higher groundwater. A lot of that is it's within a closed basin, so it doesn't discharge to surface water other than that lake.
Wow.
So for that instance, you have to design for the 100-year storm.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's discharged into what's called an open basin, it's the 25-year storm requirements.
Interesting.
But that with the soil, a lot of the times we find with the soil, it might be a good soil, might be real sandy, seem like it's going to perk real quick, but the groundwater table gets high, and once it gets saturated, that soil, it's not going to go anywhere.
But it's got a layer of clay down below that's impermeable. You're in trouble, I guess.
Yeah, or just the groundwater in general.
Sure.
If it might be perched on another layer, like a rock, lime rock, or a clay, or just a high groundwater table.
So it's got nowhere to
feeding
go.
the lake, coming from the lake. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's got nowhere to go. It can't go anywhere. So therefore, it's going to be standing water. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Lee was talking about was trying to. And again, one of the things he was doing was discussing a little bit of the part of how to make sure that the water that is going to be displaced, where it's going to go, how it should go, and then talking about, I forget exactly the terminology used, so I pardon my nomenclature, but it was some way of filtering the water so that as it hits, it's, the water is cleaner before it gets to where it's going. I mean, he was talking about some kind of...
Before it leaves the site?
Yeah, and I don't exactly fully understand that, but I thought that was interesting that they're taking that into account.
And that's being implemented a lot more in Pinellas County.
Okay.
It's called Green Stormwater Infrastructure,
Okay.
or Low Impact Development.
That's it.
Yeah.
As soon as you said it, I knew I'd heard it.
I came from the Philadelphia area
Okay.
a few years ago, and that was real big there. That was the cleanest water you could discharge from the site. You don't want it, full of antifreeze or oil that might be dripping from a car, or fertilizer that might run through the grass and then just leave the site. You want it either trapped and what's called the total suspended solids, either filtered out, and same with the nutrients, mainly the phosphates and the nitrogens.
Wow. So if people are listening to that, think about that for a second. Think about, these engineers are going out there, and yes, they have engineer brains, but they're also thinking about how to protect the environment and be good stewards to the environment by thinking about the things for us that we may not even realize that is part of their plan. So, it's one of the things that I think is important, because, it's the totality of a project, all of the moving components, and it's pretty complex. And one of the things I always find amazing, especially when we're working with engineers and attorneys and stuff, is all of the moving parts to go from A to B to Z. And it is amazing to watch everybody work because they all have their little expert areas of what they're really good at. And then they apply that knowledge to that part of the process, and then it moves to the next part in the wheel. And so that's kind of what happened with our relationship too, is that you guys needed us to come out and provide a tree risk assessment for the Maddie Williams Foundation, and of course we did that. And in part of doing that, it allowed us to give an idea of what type of risk that was going to be involved with the trees that are on their property. And of course, we notated certain things that were on the property that needed to be looked at. I think you noticed it more than anybody else, was that there was actually some kind of poisonous plant that was, I don't even know if they knew it, on property. It was some kind of poisonous plant that was growing around a tree. And what was interesting about it is I'm not sure the landscapers that were taking care of the property knew what they were maintaining into some kind of nice looking hedge was actually... to me,
it was a Solanum diphyllum.
I knew you'd know.
It would be a little mock orange, and it has a little orange. It's in the nightshade family, and the problem there is there's children there all the time, and I'm always worried about little children like to put things in their mouths.
So it's poisonous.
It's
poisonous.
It's not just poisonous to the tree.
Yeah, it's poisonous to people.
Yeah,
and so I said, look, I'd personally 86 that Solanum diphyllum or mock orange, even though it can be pretty and has been there for a while. And the odds are normally most kids won't, but some kids might. And that one...
Right, and anytime there's kids involved, Stan and I, our caution goes through the roof because, they've got a lot of kids going in and out of there, and we just want to make sure that we notate it, we make them aware of it. We pray to God they take the time to read the reports. I know how busy everyone is, so I say that with a very much an understanding of people's time. So it's not, but I will say that if people take the time to read it, there is stuff in there that will potentially help prevent a problem. Now, whether they decide to implement it or not, well, that's on them. But we try to make sure we at least notate that so that they're aware of it. And good catch on your part. With all of your horticultural knowledge and knowing what something like that could be dangerous.
I've been doing it for a while. We wrote a gardening book, sold 500,000 copies, and I was an extension horticulturist for 8 years with the university system and became a supervisor. And I enjoyed my time there, and it was a good learning place. If I didn't know something, I sent it off, and you can't know it all. I sent it off to the PhD boys up in Gainesville and let them tell me something is this mushroom or that mushroom, because you'd have people come in saying, I want to eat this mushroom. It looks like something we ate up north, or we ate it in the old country. And I go, well, yeah, but if it's the wrong one, if it's deadly Amanita, it's going to kill you. And so I'm not a mycologist. I don't deal just with mushrooms. So I'd always want to defer that because I don't want to say, well, I told them to go ahead and do it, and that was the last spaghetti they ever had. But, the other thing is, like, we sometimes steer people into homes and traditional homes and condominiums even that are built well. I mean, I've had people say, well, I just want to buy a mobile home. Well, that's fine. There are places for mobile homes. But I was called into a case where they didn't take care of the tree fell, and it killed the guy in his mobile home. And it was eerie looking inside the mobile home, seeing the chair the guy had been in before he was, demised. And I thought, good gosh, people go, well, what's wrong with a mobile home? Nothing. But the strongest wood you have often is a 2x4. And if you think a 2x4 is real strong when, 5,000 pounds comes down, think again.
But they did wind test it at least at 55 miles an hour, right? That's the speed that the tractor trailers can run at. I mean, I'm thinking that's the wind test that was used on these mobile homes.
Hopefully, it was a little more than that.
I hope so too. God, for their sakes, yeah. But it's very interesting. We're talking to Jason Sheridan, who's a civil engineer, and of course we're going to continue asking him very interesting questions throughout the rest of this program, and we'll be going to a break shortly here. So if you want to send them away, feel free to do so.
Sure, and if you like and trust James and I as people who give you advice, and if you're looking for someone and buying a home. We do that as one of the things that we do with Dream It Real Estate, but we can also help you with so many other factors as well. So stay with us as the Plant and Real Estate Talk continues.
Want to talk real estate? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com.
Why choose Stafford Tree Service? Is it because they're experienced, have the latest equipment, and friendly professional personnel? Absolutely. Stafford's positioned themselves as a leading tree trimming company in all of Tampa Bay. With honest professionals and competitive pricing, they'll earn your trust too. In business for over 15 years, Stafford Tree Service is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide you the very best tree trimming experience. Call today, 727-546-8786, 727-546-8786. On the web at StaffordTreeSVC.com.
Biophilia, our innate attraction to other living things. It's why people love plants. And around Tampa Bay, Plants, that's Plantz, is bringing nature inside in workspaces and homes by delivering beautiful foliage plants. Our plants increase oxygen and filter out pollutants, reducing stress and improving productivity. And get you in touch with your biophilic side. Go to plantz.us.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I am Stan DeFreitas, the dad, if you will, and James DeFreitas, my son. And we have Jason Sheridan, who is also a civil engineer. And when people wonder about engineers, there's different kinds of engineers. You might tell people might want to know which engineer does what. So maybe give people kind of a quick breakdown on what engineering can be.
So I guess the main three engineers that are the most common would be civil, structural, and mechanical. A lot of the mechanical that can range from designing parts for an automobile to, the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical system in the building. Structural engineers, again, it's a broad range for all of them, but that's basically the support for the building is what we deal with the structural engineering side more with. There are bridge engineers who are structural as well, and civil are just dealing with the ground, with the road.
Okay.
Not too far below ground is more geotech, but that, surface area is mainly what the civil engineers deal with. And I guess depending on what the project is, we design the site to be able to support that project. So we design the site or the roadway, whatever the land feature is, to prep and support whatever that end user is going to be using it for.
So let me just ask this before I forget too. Now, and again, you guys sound like you guys are wildly busy, but if somebody is out there and they're interested in the services that you guys provide, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you? To go through the front door of your company or to contact you directly, or how would they do that?
A lot of it is Google.
Okay, so people Google stuff.
They'll just Google engineer or civil engineer.
Okay.
And I've gotten a lot of phone calls with people who weren't necessarily as familiar with the development process that just found our name online at the top of Google search and called us.
Interesting.
And that's ranged from, little, a couple parking space addition for an existing building to we do a lot of water resources engineering as well. That's one of the areas that I specialize in, hydraulics and hydrology. So designing riprap for a stream embankment that's going to be repaired, stuff like that.
So if people need this type of service, they would just go to the website, or they would call, or how would they get a hold? Would they call you? I mean, how would that work?
That's work. They've called me. They
Okay.
Would,
and how would I get a hold of you?
Panoni.com.
Okay.
www.panoni.com.
Okay.
I am in the Clearwater office mainly.
Okay.
Every once in a while, I'm in the Winter Haven office.
And again, I assume if I go there to the .com, I could look you up and then call you, or I would email you.
You could do either or.
Okay.
There would be a link in our locations. There would be a link to the Clearwater office.
Okay.
And that's a direct number to our admin.
Okay, great. And so they would. So in other words, a lot of times what I encounter with businesses, and I don't know the size of your company, but typically the larger the size of the business, the more people are routing people to the front door so that the person inside can route you to the appropriate place for you to go. Yep. When it's a smaller company, it's like, oh, call me. My cell phone number is 727 blah blah blah. So you never. I don't.
That would work as well.
Oh, okay, great.
You could 727-325-1257 is my direct line.
Okay, great. And again, just want to emphasize too, if you call his number, he is very busy. But obviously you'll call him back.
And one of the things I learned in radio is to give the number out twice. So give me the number again.
727-325-1257.
Okay.
My direct line.
Because we want to make sure your bosses know that you are running the flag up for the company.
That's right.
And we are glad that we could work together on this and hopefully other projects down the road on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I think for a lot of folks, in the old days, everything was kind of just left. The builder would come in and they'd leave at the same level. But today you see, a lot of dirt often brought in. Things are raised up to flood level, or like in my house is on concrete pillars. So the first floor really starts up 10 feet up off the ground. And because I'm fairly close to the water. And
yeah, you're about, 5 feet sea level?
Yeah.
I mean, he's right there in Oldsmar at the top of the bay. So I understand why the builders, when they came in there, to me, it's like either build a pitcher's mound, get the house up pretty high, or put it on pillars so that you got a standing chance that you might have a structure should we have that one in a 50-year storm.
Yeah, I mean, I still have my canoe ready if that once in 100-year storm comes through. And I've told my wife before, I'm going to put it up on the deck because you never know. Even though
you'll have me put it on the deck. You're not lifting anything.
Yeah, let's get that one. Let's get that one straight. James will be over. He will be putting the canoe on my deck, and or my old La Bamba boat that I need to redo someday out there. I think if we put a plug in it, it still might be seaworthy enough to paddle down the river.
I'll let you try that out as you head towards the iceberg. But so again, we're talking to Jason Sheridan about civil engineering, and and again, we're coming at it from a very different point of view. But I always like to provide the context of why we're having an engineer on, and the reason that we're having you on is because we met you through the Maddie Williams Foundation, and we provided tree risk assessment. We've discussed this in earlier segments of the show, but I wanted to mention for those that just joined us. And one of the things that's interesting is that there is, a very distinct process that takes place. And of course, Maddie Williams hired you and your company to come out and provide, the assessment that you did. And then, of course, we provided an assessment for Maddie Williams with regards to the trees and their risk that they're at with for the site. And one of the things that we did is most of the trees were okay. There were some, I think, were moderate risk. Some were mild, and then there were some that were severe. There was one tree in particular that I remember. It looked like it had been hit by a truck. Looked like somebody had gone through. And again, that's not too surprising to me because of where the tree was growing. It was right in a driveway area, which may or may not be in part of the plans going forward that you guys have come up with, because I don't remember your guys' plans if they were even finished at that stage. But you could tell, a delivery vehicle, which is typically the case when you're talking about, a foundation that does charitable works for, for the city of Safety Harbor and for everybody at large. You could see where there could be lots of vehicles coming in of size and magnitude, and I wouldn't be too surprising if it got hit, especially if it's a large panel truck. And so, but that's, one of those things that we look at. We look to see how is the tree healing from that, point of view. We're looking to see if the tree is going through a complete compartmentalization, if it's starting to heal over that wound. And then often if the tree is in decline, we'll start to see that secondary infection starts to take place. We'll start to see wood-boring beetles. We'll look at that and, and go, well, that's a place we could get into nice. And
kind of like Meals on Wheels. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, the trees will actually emit a hormone that will attract other beetles to come in. I was
going to ask that.
I mean, and their problem is like ashes to ashes and dust to dust. I guess in God's grand plan, it's let's make things back to what it came from. Unfortunately, if it's over your main building, you don't want that 10,000 pounds coming down.
Right.
And so it's good. I think most people, and nobody does it, should have their trees checked at least maybe every 6 months.
Yeah.
And have their trees checked.
At least yearly.
Because things change. I mean, lightning bolts, windstorms, all of the things that occur that you kind of go, well, we dodged that bullet. Well, you did, but maybe the tree didn't dodge that bullet. And maybe there's something going on.
Right. And that kind of applies to almost all the businesses around here, in my opinion, because, again, knowledge is power, and what you don't know can and will hurt you. And so one of the things I would say is if you want to limit your liability, this is a very important thing to do. We fully recommend, either reach out to myself or to Stan, the certified arborist, at, 727-423-4794. If you're interested, you want to
727-423-4794.
Just want to make sure that we're repeating the good radio stewardship that you just were
I like to hit the radio voice on occasion.
There you go. And but I do think it's important. I think that people need to take the time to, even in your own personal yard, what would you rather do? Would you rather be reactive to a problem that hit your neighbor's fence, or would you have rather taken action and been proactive and said, no, I saw it, I had a guy come out, look at it, and he said I needed to treat it or it needed to come down? So I think that it'd be better to be proactive than reactive in most situations.
You might mention that citrus case too. I think that's kind of interesting.
Well, you're talking about the was 1920 citrus case with regards to, you're talking about the
the government came in and decided to take trees because of a potential disease. And they said, well, we need to take them, as the government can do. I mean, through the right of eminent domain, or, well, last year we all had to mask up. did it do anything? No. Was the mask effective? No. But we all had to do it because it made us feel good. And I think some people, I won't get into parties, said, we like the idea that you will do what you are told. And if you go along with that idea, you go, well, I better wear it. I mean, and if you weren't, you
didn't get a choice. You didn't have a choice.
It's always that's great, too. You say, you've got to have it to come in the restaurant. Now, I'm going to set you 3 feet over here. You can take your mask off. Yeah. I said, you mean the air is a whole lot different 3 feet over here than it was over here? Yes, but you will do what you are told.
That's right. But we, of course, we want to stress that we love doing business with either side.
Oh, yeah, I'm
and
not
both
picking on
sides
either
make
side.
Points that are interesting.
I think it's sometimes more of a government thing than it is politics. It's just...
Absolutely. And I do want to say thank you so much, Jason, for coming in and spending your afternoon with us a little bit and educating us up on what you do.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully I'll be in again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Want to talk real estate? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online aflre.com.